It's Wednesday, March 23rd, 2022, 6 p.m. This regular workshop meeting of the Board of Commissioners is called to order. City Clerk, will you call the roll?
Mayor Hendricks,
Here.
Commissioner Andrews.
Here.
Commissioner Hudson.
Here.
I'll let the record show there's a quorum for the meeting.
First on the agenda is public comment. Anyone that has a public comment, come up to the podium, state your name and address. This is for anything that is not on tonight's agenda. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm Marilyn Halfling. I live at 806 Bay Point Drive. I wish to comment on the residential parking problems that have been going on for a long time, and I've mentioned them in public spaces before and talked with a variety of people, and somehow nothing gets done. I'm talking specifically of 140th and Bay Shore and Bay Point where I live. And it is almost impossible for me to ever get to Gulf Boulevard or to get to 150th if I take Bay Shore without having to stop at least once to let coming cars get through, because on both sides of the streets, there are cars and vehicles and also people walking and biking, and there's bound to be an accident even at our slow speeds that we're supposed to be doing, partly because pedestrians and bikers don't follow where they're supposed to be and maybe don't know where they're supposed to be, but also because we have both sides of the street allowing cars and trucks to be there. And I just think a very simple answer would be to choose one side of the street or other that's no street parking ever. And then there'd at least be one lane. I'd only have to wait for the coming car to get through, or whoever was there first. And people are polite, but it is amazing. Our narrow streets that people will put their expensive vehicles, but mostly it's construction people. You'll see 2 or 3 house being built, 2 or 3 cars on the side where the house being built is, and then there will be a big truck immediately across. Well, you can barely even squeeze between that one car, and you've got this whole long way. And I thought that as there'd be less construction on Bay Point and more fancy houses or whatever, we'd have fewer people parked. But in reality, it seems like the more expensive the house, the more service people we have, and the more Amazon and FedEx and everything else coming in. And it's really, people comment, you think Bay Point is kind of like out of the way, but sometimes it's worse than Bay Shore. And Bay Shore is pretty bad during the week. So anyway, if you could check in about one side parking, it might help us deal with things. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Next on the agenda is new performance available performance appraisal forms for charter officers. Each of us has gotten copies from a number of different cities. Hopefully you've had time to review them. Floor is open for discussion.
I like the Oldsmar sheets. A lot of the times, well, to start, I always hated my performance appraisals. So And now we're going to make these people go through 5 of them. I'm not sure that that's a very comfortable thing to do to people. So I don't know if we can do something where we fill out some of them and just provide it, and then the individual is allowed to come back if they say they want, if they want a personal appraisal, we can do it, or if they would prefer not to. There's a lot of things that are important in the officers that we can't answer very well. A lot of the how they deal with the other people. And I think that's the most important thing. And we don't, if we grade them on that, or it's going to be based on 1 or 2 incidents that we see and not what they've done through the whole year. So I'm a little nervous about doing any appraisals. Thanks.
No, Dave, I agree with you. I agreed with your first statement the best. I hated doing them. I hated receiving them because I think they're all just way too textbook and way too standard. And I know by charter, but we have to do them, right, Tom? I think that's a requirement. I would like, I do like Oldsmars, except for the fact it's long. I mean, we got a lot of different questions in there and a lot of different things, exactly what you're saying, that we don't really, we're not here on a day-to-day basis. We shouldn't be here on a day-to-day basis, monitoring the interaction between employees, monitoring how they get along. The only time we ever hear feedback on a relationship between a charter officer and an employee is when there's a problem. Okay, we never really hear a whole lot of praise or anything like that. So that's kind of unfair from that light, especially since we don't have firsthand knowledge of it. I would like to simplify this. Obviously, it's a requirement by the charter, so I'm obviously willing to do it. I know we haven't probably done them in a little bit. And I think it would be unfair to put 2 new members into an evaluation process right away when they haven't even sat up here yet. But I would like to have a very simplistic process. These are just for, Robin, if I get this correct, this is just for us with charter officers, not
Yes,
your evaluations for employees, correct? It's a whole different form?
yes, yeah, what you're discussing, which was brought up, was by the commission, was to appraisal forms for the 4 charter officers, the manager, the attorney, the clerk, and the finance director, treasurer. We internally evaluate employees every year, and that's the first form in the agenda that the city has been using for at least a couple of years. And it's a few pages, but it's a fairly standard form right here, performance and merit evaluation, that we've been using at least for a couple of years. And so the question before you was, the discussion is whether you wanted to simplify or find an example of one for the 4 of us, not for all city employees, although previously former Commissioner Helen Price had asked that she wanted to redo the one for all, or encourage to redo one for all employees. If it is for all employees, it would have to go in front of the Civil Service Commission for their review and approval.
Okay, so here's the $1 million question. When are these due? When do we have to have these evaluations by? So do we have a little bit of time?
Tom's
Because-
looking through the charter, but
Okay.
my guess would be at least annually for
Right.
the charter officers, and I'm guessing probably at the annual, at least once a year, either at the employee's anniversary when they were hired, when you appointed the clerk or the attorney, or I was appointed in December, so I'm guessing within 1 year of when I was appointed, that's when you would do it. So likely at a November meeting or early, or December, one of those 2 that you evaluate the manager. As far as the others, they could be at the same time, or we could split them across.
Right.
However, really up to all of you, but I know in my agreement, it says that it must be within the year.
Right.
So-
No. And I've read that portion. The other thing is they have, Tom, don't they have to be publicly done? There's like yeah, I'm sorry.
I just looked through quickly, Article 5 of the charter, charter officers, administrative departments, and civil service commission, looking under each one of those different categories of the charter officials, there's no requirement under any of those categories for an evaluation. My opinion is it should be done for each one of us, and it should be done annually. And as for what time of the year, obviously that's something in your control. Every city does it a little bit different. Some of them do it during budget season so that they know whether they're going to give an increase to the city clerk and the city manager, for example. Some of them do it at the beginning of the fiscal year in October. So whatever is your pleasure, but the purpose of the evaluation is, as I saw it, is to let us all know how we're doing, how well we're doing or not. And if necessary for the city clerk and the city manager and the city treasurer, obviously would be for the purposes of their salary. Mine is locked in pursuant to contract. It wouldn't be necessarily for that. But
So is mine for the two-year agreement that the commission approved. But there is a requirement in the agreement. I haven't looked at the other agreements, but mine does require an evaluation within the year.
Yeah, and first, I think people should be evaluated more than once a year. Even if it's just a talk to say, here's how I think you're doing, I think you're doing a good job, or here's where I think we could have some improvement.
Mayor, if I could just interrupt one more time, I didn't answer the other question you had asked. And the other question that you had asked is should these be public? And the answer is yes. When they're a written evaluation, it should be made public. After they're completed, whether or not each individual commissioner meets with each charter official and discusses them before they hand them out, that's your pleasure. But if they are a written evaluation, they become a public record and they are available to the public. Okay?
Because that's what I was confused of, because I remember, this was prior to you, but we were asked to go through our evaluations at a meeting. And I'm like, that was a little, I just invasive, I would say. That, if they're available to the public, of course, it's public record, anybody can get their copies of it, that's fine. I just don't see any reason to have a meeting and discuss each person individually and go through it. I think it would take too long. I'm all for, I agree with the mayor, I'm all for evaluations. I think that everybody, because I think it's a very good measuring tool on both sides of the equation. I would like to simplify it, though. I would like to kind of scale this down a little bit to where we don't have that much interaction with y'all on a regular basis. It's basically meetings and individual sessions, and we have to ask questions. Outside of that, that's pretty much our involvement. So to answer some of these questions on here to try to give Clara an evaluation on a 12-page document with 80 questions on it is probably insane. I don't think we can answer all that. We'd be NA on 60% of them, if not more. So can we work on this and scale it down a little bit, Robin? I mean, maybe put it in front of the Civil Service Commission. Maybe they want to take a peek at it. We can throw some ideas at them, gather some ideas on questions that we want to ask for each individual charter member, and then scale it down to a page or two. And I think we go from there. And then I don't know. I don't know how you guys feel, but I think we should be required to meet with each charter officer and discuss it with them so they know where we stand and so there's no surprises. Just my thoughts.
Yeah, well, I went through these from each of the cities. Ocklawaha County, I thought, had a very good one. And that's because a lot of it is, you're scoring on different points on here, and there's a place for comments, but it's not half a page for comments for each point as you have with Oldsmar. And I think that would be a much easier way to score. That's just my feeling on it, but this is something, we're in no big rush to do it. We may want to let the civil service take a look at it and also let the new commissioners be involved and let them read over it also. And So we've got more input on it than just the three of us to make that decision. Any other discussion? Any public comments on this? Okay, next is fiscal year 2023 federal community project funding. City manager.
Mayor and Commission, we had discussed this back in February about there's still a considerable amount of federal funding, mainly for the transportation related through the Department of Transportation for a variety of projects. And we did receive earlier today some more guidance on exactly the funding types and funding programs that are available. We're going to look through that, and again, just received this morning. But really, this item is really to get your thoughts, anything that you would like for us to pursue out of essentially the infrastructure bill that Congress passed earlier this year, that they made funding available for the current year and for fiscal 23. In the documentation we received today, and I think, Mayor, you received an email from the federal government as well, or that states the application deadline is actually May the 23rd. So anything that you deem that we would qualify for, realistically, we wouldn't qualify for a lot of the funding. They seem to be more kind of area wide or county wide, again, mostly related to transportation, but there's really nothing that specific that we can. The general requirements that are listed in the agenda item, again, were just updated very recently because that's what I received earlier today, but it's not significantly different than what's in the packet. It's simply stating a lot about the process, what would be required in the application, and it's all electronic, but unfortunately, a lot of it is not specific to what, a lot of the funding isn't specific to what we could utilize, but there is some. I'm not sure, for example, if we could use it for a parking garage. That's a question that I have. That would be a good usage of it, but or whether any other improvements to Gulf Boulevard, such as the undergrounding, that would something that could be potentially a funding. However, that's the item that, again, we discussed last month. A lot of them are utility related projects that could we use some for stormwater? That's another question that possibly could be for the enhancements to our stormwater utility.
Yeah, we've got a number of stormwater projects coming now, and there may be more in the pipeline for years on down the road that we can take a look at and see if we can get some of this funding for that. But also undergrounding utilities on 150th, because that's something I'd like to see done. And this may go in, this kind of overlapping probably with the ARPA funds.
Yes, a little bit, although those are essentially our funds. And,
Right.
so
and
but yes.
and we've got things at the Marina, the Hydride, and incorporating public works building. And if it turns out that we don't have the room over there to do that, maybe we look at a public works building over there and use some money just for a public works building, if it appears that we're not going to have the room to do that. Those are a couple of things that I've seen. We've got the groins taken care of, so.
Yeah, Mr. City Manager, I also have to thank you for, and your staff, because the attention that is being put on grants and finding money that we weren't looking for previously is tremendous, and I love it. I'll echo most of the mayor's sentiments. I think that, obviously we know the projects that are in front of us. I know Megan's on top of a lot of this stuff as far as with the roadways and the undergrounding of utilities and the infrastructure stuff. What else did I see? Obviously the solar issue. I know we talked about that a little bit about potentially doing that on the rec building or, heck, I mean, any building in town, if we could figure out a way to do it where it's cost effective and we can start becoming a little greener as we go. I think that, that's, we don't want to be the last guy to the deal table on that because that funding will probably run out at some point. And the only other thing I see on here that I'd love to do is, we could put together a space force. That would be like really cool. That was a joke, in case anybody at home wasn't. There's not enough people here to laugh at that. So I was kidding.
I
just
got it,
so-
Doug. Some
Okay.
people don't
okay.
have a sense of humor. but I
Okay,
do.
okay. Anyway, but congratulations. Like I say, I do like the attention to detail. I do like the fact that everybody's looking for money in places that we weren't looking for it before. So keep up the good work and let's keep firing away.
Okay, this was one where you were talking about we don't have a lot of options for getting it through, or, we can send a lot of things to Mr. Chris, but there's a lot of other people that are asking for things.
Correct, yeah.
So is there something that the staff says, we think this would go through, or this one checks all the right boxes? The undergrounding, solar, anything like that look like we should put all of our eggs in that basket and shoot for that?
No, absolutely. It's at this point, as I mentioned earlier, we're still sorting through the data, the information that I received earlier today. But yeah, there's something, I mean, specifically that we would be rated higher than somebody else is difficult to ascertain at this point, but we will certainly do that. And really, I think everything that's been mentioned, we can look to determine if that's a possible funding source, but I mean, that's what we will do.
Yeah,
Again, we have 2 months to kind of finalize.
I don't know if we've got any seawalls, city-owned seawalls that are getting close. Do we?
I think
Probably at the marina.
at the Marina.
Okay. That's something
another one,
we
but-
could add on there also. Has anyone else got anything? Is there any public comment on this? No. Moving on to the American Rescue Plan Act. City Manager, this kind of overlaps B.
Yes, Mayor and Commissioners, similar, but these are funds that we have received the first part of the funding, a little over $1 million, and we are scheduled to receive the second, little over $1 million, I believe, in September. And so these are funds that we can, very wide scope of what they can be used on. And as we mentioned last time as well, so our total that we will have available by likely September would be a little over 2.15 million. And so this is a little easier than the previous item because these are your decisions. I mean, our suggestions from the staff, but the commission to decide, and we don't have to do anything with any state or federal to get approval to spend these funds. And that's why you have in the agenda item some of the different fundings, some of the different items that we can pay for, projects from infrastructure to public safety to quality of life or recreation to realistically a wide array of different items, economic development, tourism. There will be or even IT software, et cetera. So just a wide array of items. There will be an item later in this meeting for a piece of equipment that we need due to the current piece of equipment that is not functioning and will cost a lot, but that's an example of what these funds could be spent on as well.
Okay, and there's a couple of other things too, and one, because everybody's aware of the sand issue at John's Pass. And I don't want to get everyone's hopes up, so I'm not going to mention things that are in the works for that. But we also may potentially be needing some of that money for a partial dredging of that. So it's another thing we can add on until we find out what our governor's going to do on that.
Yeah, I'm obviously I'm all for anything that's going to better the city. I think the one thing that I would task staff with is for this type of money that we're getting, which it's not a freebie by any means. We obviously went through some tough times to be able to acquire it. But to utilize this into a revenue generating activity or project would be, we could take that $2 million and turn it into 5 million or turn it into something that produces, $500,000, $1 million a year going forward. That to me is a gift that keeps on giving. So, doing one-time projects is great, but we could use this and then again, kind of like we did with the increase, the 50-cent increase for parking dedicated towards a certain project. We could do this, buy something, do something that generates income, and that could be done. And that money that we make off of that could be sectioned out into the beautification of the city, to pocket parks and Rock Park and the dredging and things like that. Just to spend it, then it's gone. I think if we can find a way to do something where we can generate revenue with it, again, I think it's just a gift that keeps on giving for us.
Yeah, I agree. And probably on this list, I would have to say parking garage is probably the main thing.
One item I would add is included in here partially for recreation or quality of life is, for example, a concession stand or enhancements to Rock Park that could generate revenue into the future, given having, we just had college softball teams here. If some of those, if not necessarily the fields, but certainly the concession stand to begin with, and a restroom facility or a building that could house that, plus something where you could announce it could generate more teams wanting to come and play here, use the facilities, which generates more economic activity in our area and helps businesses, et cetera. That's something that does generate money into the future, if some directly for us, but mostly economic impacts to, again, our businesses, and to include, restaurants, hotels, retail outlets, John's Pass, all of those teams that came here, and the college teams that came here, most of them ate at local restaurants. They visited John's Pass. Certainly the fans and the parents and families that came here did. Again, it's sometimes difficult to explain that to a lot of folks because it's the economic activity. We may have received $5,000 or $10,000 directly to cover our costs, but there's a significant additional value by a business, receiving a $600 for one meal of a team, or et cetera. So that's something in the future related to what Commissioner Andrews said, as well as sort of, not really additional revenue enhancement, but protecting our equipment, as was mentioned in the prior item, as a public works building, so we can house the equipment that currently sits out open to the elements. So that has a potential just as a cost savings into the future.
Okay.
How does the concession stand work now? Is that something that we've sold to the youth softball, or is that something that the city would want to run themselves?
So we currently allow the Madeira Beach Little League softball, baseball they operate it, they staff it. I believe they keep the proceeds from it, but they're very limited to what they can do. They're pretty much selling packaged items.
Mm-hmm.
The softball games that were just held in the last couple of weeks, we actually contracted with a vendor who brought their own entire equipment because they can't use the concession stand other than just selling packaged goods. So the way that it almost appears as it was built as an afterthought to the entire park, because it's very small. It only has 2 bathrooms. There was a constant line of people waiting to use the 2 bathrooms during all those softball games, but it's limiting as to what it can do. We really don't generate revenue. We allow it for the revenue of the Little League, and that covers their costs and really just as a quality of life. In terms of, something that's you just have much more functionality with a newer, a little bit more modern building. Sits a little higher. The electrical panels are a little bit low. And again, it wasn't designed for any on-site cooking. It doesn't really have a kitchen even to cook hamburgers or hot dogs. So currently the Little League will set up a grill outside, which, a little bit questionable whether that's allowed, but it is a Little League. They're pretty much selling it to their participants and their fans. And so that's how that could benefit in generating just more economic activity into the future and more fees that we could charge if we decided to operate the concession or hire a firm that could use the facility. They would pay us a fee in order to do that.
Okay, I like the idea of it going to the Little League. Maybe we can get a little bit of a kickback of whatever the profits are or something to add bathrooms or to make the facility better. But I don't really want the city to run that and add it to the recreation department.
Right. Well, if I can chime in, it's when that was designed, first off, Robin's exactly correct. In the initial plans, when this was being built out, there wasn't even a concession stand. There were no bathrooms. It was just an open field. Fortunately, some other folks stepped in at the last minute and we got what we got built. What was designed, and when the Little League was never our Little League. It was Gulf Beach's Little League. So what we did is we decided a long time ago, we got them together and they became Mad Beach Youth Baseball and Softball. The money, the proceeds, or the fees to join the league, the registration fees came to the city. The city then basically set a limit. You can buy this much in uniform, and we protected our margin. The problem with the concession stand is, first, you have to put staff in there to run it, and then we'd have to pay staff. Secondly, you'd have to go out and get the Sam's Club and buy all the food. Then you'd have to have somebody out there cooking and the liability and everything else. All we did, Little League got their own liability insurance policy. They run it, they keep the proceeds, and this allows them to go out and do other projects that we don't have to pay for. So the city gets their money, we give a certain amount to pay for the costs of uniforms and the likes of that. We keep a certain amount to manage the fields and to keep the fields raked and cut and everything else along the line there. So we are probably the only city in the country that runs a profitable Little League from the city's standpoint. Most other people just have to donate the land and just let Little League run it. We've actually turned it into a business. So it's worked out pretty well.
Is there any reason temporarily when we have a group like the softball tournaments come in, that we couldn't just get a food truck out there till we could get something built? So, yeah, so all those folks have a place to go to get something to eat.
Yes, we can definitely. And that's sort of what was out there when the college teams were here. There was like a mini food truck that had some food. So yeah, we can, any type of renovations to that area would. The other component related for revenue would be to determine whether we potentially cover one or more of the existing courts that are out there. That's another, some of the players have said you could have more activity, you could have tournaments if there was a covering to not be exposed to all the elements, but not necessarily to completely enclose it. Although that would be obviously also beneficial, but with the growth and the usage, mainly, for example, of pickleball and how that's growing, continues to grow in popularity, there are lots of tournaments, and a lot of the players here go to those tournaments in other parts of the county and other parts of the state. So that's another item that was just mentioned as well, that you could as a revenue generating potentially.
Okay. Anything else? Is there any public comment on this?
Chuck Dillon, 529 Lillian Drive. Actually, it was about the other one. I didn't remember which was which as far as the monies and that stuff goes. But I think that federal community project, I think, would be excellent for our solar agenda to, show the state and everybody that we are going green. And one of which was with our purchase of the electric vehicle. And also with these potential monies, you could do storage facilities and charging facilities and all of those little things that add up. But it's, I think that would be an excellent, thing to, avenue to be going for in that fund. So like that would be what we're looking to do with that monies or any monies that we would get is specifically to bring our city up to everybody's standards. And I mean, and if you look at TV, there's all electric cars being sold. Everybody's got electric vehicles. So we could get a step up on that. And I don't know whether or not there's any other cities that do have solar. I mean, and then we're going for the future, we're providing our own energy and everything. And that seems to be a potential for a great fund, and then the other funds, yeah, I mean, as I was looking through the information, that's all great, divvy it up accordingly. We've got lots of places where it could go very well. And I think the attachments that the city had provided where they thought would be good parts or areas for that $2 million is very good. So sorry I missed that one. I didn't know which was which without having my computer in front of me to go through the information. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck.
I believe Duke Energy has a program for
Sir, I need your
installing.
name and
Oh,
address.
Bill Gay, 423 150th Avenue, Madeira Beach. I believe Duke Energy has a program for installing charging facilities. I know that not Boca Vista, but Madeira Cove has a charging facility that was put in by Duke. I don't know if Duke is still doing that, but you might take a look at that as an option for installing something on city properties for charging vehicles.
Anyone else? Okay, next is an update on the parking garage.
Thank you, Mayor and Commission. Per the request at the last regular meeting, I guess it was to discuss where we were with the parking garage and the revenue, specifically a question about how much revenue we had received, and that information is in the agenda as to, we have met Public Works and Megan and I with one of our engineers of record to very, very preliminarily determine what a garage, what it might look like, the stories, whether it would be, mixed use, whether it incorporates any retail, any emergency facilities or anything to that extent. So really just very early discussions in terms of the location. It seems that the commission has previously really requested or commented on at the city-owned lot at 130th Street. And I think the engineer of record really felt that that's a fairly adequate location to place one. I've received a lot of comments actually, and since that was discussed at the last meeting with, interestingly, a lot of residents and some visitors curious as to how it would look and whether it would take away from the look and the feel of Gulf Boulevard. But just to relay back some comments that I probably at least about 20 comments with, is there another location rather than the preferred location to, but just passing that along. The revenue we've currently received through the first 3 months or nearly 3 months, because we started, the fee went into effect on December the 9th, and we received just under $90,000. And Again, that will likely increase a little bit through March and April as it's a busier time of the year. The lots are a little more filled, fuller. So roughly, if you take that over a full year, so roughly between 350 and 400,000 is what we would collect on an annual basis for the cost of the future cost of a parking facility. Depending on what we would be looking for the facility to have or what the recommendations would be, any type of parking garage that would have between 300 to 600 spaces would be between 3 and 6 million, kind of on a conservative estimate. We obviously wouldn't know until we hire a firm to come up with potential designs and again, what the characteristics of the garage would be and what other, again, activities such as whether retail or offices or anything else that would be in the garage.
Okay, thank you.
Do we know how soon we'll have the traffic study?
So we've had some
completed?
counts from the sheriffs and the DOT put a box out as well. We hope to have that within the next month as well. But we've had one already that I mentioned before that was in February, the early part of February, if I recall, that the average was about 86,000 vehicles a day through the area between 129th and 130th. But again, that was in early February. And hopefully we'll have some for early part of March and then the middle of March and then as well for April. 2 different counts in April.
Okay, so when we have, what do they give us at the end of this study? I mean, we were asking about putting a light in at, 130th, and taking out those crosswalks. Will that be part of the study that they accept that, or is that
No.
something that we need to go to them and request
That's
based on the
something-
results?
That's something separate. This is really just the traffic counts. But in terms of the design, yeah, we would need to approach DOT as to whether they believe that the counts would justify, well, the counts and as well as the potential design, whether that would not require, but whether that would, make it necessary to have a traffic light there. So we'll reach out to DOT to see what their suggestions are on that.
Okay.
Yeah, those crosswalks are in themselves cause a lot of congestion down there. There's 3 in a row. So hopefully that, that traffic light, if we can get it, would be, would help with the traffic issues we have there.
Well, first, I'm very encouraged by the numbers because it says from December 9th through February 28th. If you follow tourism around here at all, these are pretty much our slowest months of the year. So I will probably guess that our number for this year, because March has been booming, and I'm sure April and all the way through the summer will be as well. You're probably looking around $450,000 to $500,000 just on my rough estimates. And I think that's what we thought initially. So, and Robin, just based on what you were saying before, I can understand some of the concern of the citizens on this. And I was approached a couple of times about it as well. And a lot of the comments were, why would you build something like this with taxpayer money? And I said, well, you obviously aren't understanding what we're trying to do here. We're building this on the back of tourism dollars. Right there's $89,000, so $500,000 at the end of the year. Any loan that we take out is going to be subsidized by that plus, and we'll be able to pay this off. It's $6 million in no time, because we're not even adding the parking revenue, the $3 an hour that we'd get from the garage per car.
Right.
And as far as the traffic study, Dave, I totally agree with that, except for the fact I don't think a parking garage is going to add additional traffic to the area. I think what it would do would just give the number one concern, according to John's Pass Village on their website, the number one concern of everybody that comes down here is nothing about prices, nothing about the beach, nothing about service. I can't find a place to park. And I think that this thing is just kind of a no-brainer. And you can design it. I mean, I've seen parking garages, and I think, and the reason why this all got drummed up, and Dave, I don't think you're on the board yet when this happened, but when we had Jerry from the University of Florida came and he showed us how other cities are developing revenue patterns. And he used Delray Beach as a great example, which was ironic because I had a buddy in here from there and he goes, this looks like Delray Beach 10 years ago. Delray Beach, 8 of their 10 projects that they did revenue generating were parking garages, and they made them look like beautiful buildings. You know, it was like they did the outsides real nice, and you really couldn't tell whether it was a building or a condominium complex. And this one, there shouldn't be anybody complaining. It's not blocking nobody's view. People, oh, well, nobody will park there. Well, yeah, but it's also it's on the beach. So you're gonna have people going to the beach that are gonna park there. It's across the street. There's a crosswalk right there to walk into John's Pass. And it's really the first piece of parking that you get coming north to south. So I think to me, it's a no-brainer, and I'd be happy if anybody wants to call me or have a conversation about it. I've got all the data, I've got all the documents. I'd love to chat with anybody about this. I love this idea. I think it's going to be great for us.
Well, also, it will actually cut down on traffic congestion because there are cars down there, the same cars circling around 2, 3, 4 times. It's going to eliminate that. So rather than going around and around or stopping out in the middle of the village waiting for a parking spot, they're just going to be going in the parking garage. So I really think it's really a no-brainer for the city. It's a revenue generator, and it's revenue that we'll have for the long term.
And Mayor and Commissioners, one other item related, our engineer of record didn't mention that the possibility of, for lack of a better term or phrase, to square the property. It's a little bit of an odd shaped lot with a right of way on the south side of our parking lot that is south of a private parking lot for an adjoining property. Not to get into too many details, they mentioned about, again, just squaring the lot, meaning is there a possibility of expanding the size of the city lot? And that would require the potential for a type of a public-private partnership to find parking solutions for both everything that has been said, as well as for potentially 1, possibly 2 private property owners adjacent to that lot. So that was their suggestion to begin investigating that possibility. So we've started to do that as well to determine how that may or may not work, which may incorporate potentially the city, if not contemplating something that we would bring back to you with other options for the lot.
And to your other point, can we build it somewhere else? Well, I look around this city and I don't really see a whole lot of spots, and I'm not going to bring the library up because I'll get pitchforks thrown at me. So, but yeah, I mean, number one, that's where our congestion of traffic is, and that's where people are looking to park is down there, and that's where our visitors are coming to. So, like I said, I just think it's a home run. It's revenue in perpetuity for the city, and that's our job up here. We're not here to really satisfy the needs of right now. We're here to make sure that the city keeps continuing on and keeps having the money in order to do all of our infrastructure projects that have been ignored for so long. So, thanks.
So yeah, our main goal here, we've got one of the lowest millage rates in the county, and we want to generate revenue to keep it that way. We're 2.75. I think St. Pete it's either almost 6 or over 6, right around 6.
The city of St. Petersburg or St. Pete Beach?
City of St. Petersburg.
Yeah, I think they're one of the higher ones.
Yeah. So everything we do like this is trying to generate revenue, is to help the residents of Madeira Beach. Y'all have anything else? Nope. Any public comment on this? Next is vendors blocking Gulf Boulevard. And that's a big one. I see it every day. I'm up and down Gulf Boulevard. Mr. Gomez, have you got some information for us on this?
Nothing really, I mean, other than exactly what what you just mentioned, Mayor, and we see the same and staff sees the same from delivery trucks to vans and trucks actually picking up items, for example, from one of the fisheries on Gulf Boulevard. So it's visiting some of the businesses on Gulf Boulevard where really one of the options is for the deliveries to occur earlier in the day. If some of them were to occur first thing in the morning, then they can utilize, for example, since they're only there for anywhere from a few minutes to 10 minutes at most, if they utilize some of the existing parking areas that are not full, then that allows for them to not be on Gulf Boulevard. But unfortunately, most of the deliveries occur throughout the day rather than in the morning. So the only thing is we can simply have a communication directly with all the businesses to advise them of, I'm sure they're aware that that's what's happening, that they're stopping on Gulf Boulevard, but we can begin a campaign to inform and advocate for, let's find some alternative ways to have your products delivered where they're not blocking, or certainly parking in the middle of Gulf Boulevard, where then they're putting the delivery personnel at a little bit of risk because you're crossing 2 lanes of traffic to deliver the products into the businesses. It's just a little bit of a challenge. It requires the ability for, a solution is, again, either early in the morning when the parking lots are not full for at least a few businesses, combined with the ability to, requiring them to walk a little bit further, which that isn't always that easy to do, although the deliveries tend to have, they're pulling or pushing carts on wheels. So it's not as if they're lifting big items, but I know in one instance, I saw a forklift deliver containers to one of the restaurants that was, I'm inferring, collecting, there to pick up their fish for the restaurant. So it's just a variety of delivery trucks, vans, and occasionally you get an 18-wheeler delivering a pallet of items to businesses along Gulf Boulevard.
Well, it happens on 140th too.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry,
Right when
140th.
Right when you
150th.
turn on to 140th, there is a truck that delivers to the breakfast restaurant there. And he parks in the middle of the lane, and it's 1 lane. So you make a turn onto 140th, and all of a sudden you got a truck in front of you, and you can't go around him because you can't see around him. And he could very easily either pull in the lot or pull right around that corner onto Palm Street. And same way, making a right turn going north on Gulf Boulevard, making a right onto 150th. I went by there yesterday, and there's a beer truck stopped in the turn lane delivering beer to a restaurant there during the middle of the day, and traffic was all backed up. So they can very easily go to First Street and go in the back of these places.
And we've shared this with since when this was put on the agenda with our deputies to help, kind of encourage the trucks to not park where they are. But again, they're kind of limited with when they, due to the timing of when they are arriving, which is kind of interesting, obviously from mid-February through Memorial Day, because it does takes you more time to get out here, obviously, but all the years I was just up the road, this was the same issue. I think it still is the same issue decades later. You try to encourage the delivery trucks to go behind businesses, for example. We don't have much of an well, you mentioned the one option on First Street and 100, as you get closer to 150th, but it's just one of those, we just need to stay on the delivery trucks and the businesses to help us out as well.
Well, I have a little knowledge on this situation. I get a couple of delivery trucks a day, but Yeah, you're right. So here's the issue. The issue is, I think a lot of these businesses aren't open enough or don't have anybody in there. That can change. You can send somebody in at 5 o'clock in the morning to get a delivery. That's not a big deal. I don't, I think we want to work, it's kind of like the little clock that we always talk about. Everybody's got to kind of work together between the residents and the businesses and the administration. There's a few offenders. I don't think there's as many offenders. It just seems like a lot because it just happens in the middle of the day and there's a tractor trailer in front of a restaurant on Gulf Boulevard and everybody's forced to try to change lanes and adds to whatever the traffic congestion that we have during spring break. I think we need to isolate, because certainly not everybody, because everybody does. There's a big restaurant across the street from my house that gets their deliveries when I'm going to work in the morning at 5 a.m. and they're in and done before anybody even knows that they're there. We would like that to become more the norm than the other side of it. I think the restaurant that you're talking about doesn't open till 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, so they probably don't ask their delivery guy to come in at 5 a.m. Most delivery companies want to deliver early. Okay, they get their people on the road at midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning. They want to get their routes done and get it done because it costs them money to have people on the roads and stuck in traffic, and they got to pay overtime. So I think we need to isolate the ones that are the major offenders right now. Let's try to get some alternative methods in place. Let's see if they follow them. If not, then we take a step further and start putting in hours of that you can. I mean, apartment buildings, sometimes you can't move in on certain days. I mean, it's this isn't uncommon. So if they have a legitimate reason, then we can hear it out and we can kind of go case by case. But yeah, to say it's a blanket thing that it's happening all over the place, it's really not. It's not as bad as it would seem. There's a handful of people that are violating it and really making it tough on everybody else. So.
Yeah, it only takes one to. I don't have any more on that other than just
Yeah,
talking
I mean,
to
at
the
this point,
businesses and the
we
vendors.
weren't planning on any regulatory or any additional regulatory measures, really. I think working with, as Commissioner Andrews and the mayor stated, just to work with businesses, work with the delivery companies to see how to improve, and if there are other options for them to stop and make their deliveries, that hopefully they can do that without a significant inconvenience to them, even though it is inconveniencing Gulf Boulevard occasionally.
Yeah. Anything else? Any public comment on this? Next is the Marina Hydride Storage Facility. City Manager, you've got a presentation for us.
Well, I just included in the packet the presentation that the company, real estate company provided at the couple of
Founders
meetings
3.
ago. Right, and so that's the only item. We have not heard from them. I think the discussion was simply to have a discussion in the future as to what the status might be, or I think they were reaching out to us as to where we were in the process. And as not really discussed in the prior, well, we didn't discuss in prior meetings, the restrictions that are at the marina from when the property was deeded by the state to the city. And there are various restrictions, and essentially the property must be managed and operated by the city and really can't be leased to anyone else. And that was provided in an opinion back in 2006 to the city from the city's attorney at that time, based on, again, the restrictions that are listed on the deeds. So whether you can put a high and dry is a little bit complicated. The reality is that it would be very difficult to fit one in the property due to the restrictions on the property. However, the most definitive answer to that would be if we were to have a surveyor go out and then determine precisely whether a structure can be placed and whether, but a high and dry likely would not fit. And based on the parcels that are on there, and here's a little bit of on the screen, even though they're upside down the parcels, but you really wouldn't be able to fit I guess for lack of a better term, a traditional high and dry. You'd pretty much be relegated to the area where the public works equipment is currently, which where there used to be a public works warehouse is about the only space in that entire property. And the map, this survey shows 7 parcels, although parcels 2 and 3 are, 3 and 4 and part of 2 are part of the submerged waterway, submerged land. So that's kind of where we are. This issue had been reviewed before, and that's sort of where it was left several years ago as to what could or could not be placed on there.
Okay. I wish they had put one or were going to put one at the Lever Rocks property, because even if it were there, we could generate a lot of revenue on fuel, because all the boats that are in there would be coming to the city's fuel docks. So that would be a win for us also. So I guess we need to talk about whether or not we do want to do a survey of the property, see whether or not it's even feasible.
Or I would say much more current survey that would be able to tell us what could be built exactly where. Again, the letter is the attorney's opinion stating that, for example, you couldn't put a restaurant on parcel 2. You couldn't put a restaurant on parcel 4. And because of the restrictions on it, and no, you couldn't put a restaurant if you were going to lease it, excuse me, versus, I mean, the city could put a restaurant, but I don't know, probably not a good idea to staff for the city to operate a restaurant with staff like a concession stand, but that's what we were provided years ago as to what could or could not go. The reason I'm saying some sort of survey to tell us exactly the dimensions and what could be placed on there, but in terms of again, as I stated earlier, a traditional high and dry, that probably is not, there isn't enough space on the parcels to accommodate one.
Okay, now a restaurant, the deed restrictions that are on there, is there a way to go back and amend the deed
That's-
restrictions?
We would have to ask the state if they would be amenable to doing that. And we can certainly do that if we
Okay.
can. We can proceed to ask them if that's a possibility.
Because I don't see the city running a restaurant, but
Right.
I know I've traveled a lot on the water, and almost every marina I've stopped in, and a lot of them were municipal marinas, and they all had restaurants. And that brings in a lot of transient business.
Yep, agreed. I agree.
And most of them are relatively high-end restaurants. So maybe we need to look at a restaurant and a public works building there. I know the public works building can go there pretty easily. It was already there.
Yep. You put a restaurant on the ground floor. No, just kidding.
Well,
Up.
the building that's there, the Marina building was built with eventually putting a restaurant up there in mind. Structurally, it will hold it. It looks small to me for a, destination restaurant but something we can at least do a little legwork on and get it nailed down a little bit more as to what we really can do or can't do with the deeds.
I gotta be honest with you, I'm just stunned that we've never seen this before. I mean, we've been talking about this for 2 years and we haven't seen this before. I mean, this Lynn's creed, it's that, elections have consequences sometimes, and getting rid of staff that's got local knowledge to replace them with people that don't. And then find something like this that could have stopped this discussion 2 years ago before we went down this road. Wow. Okay. Robin, thank you. I mean, this is good, thorough work to find this kind of stuff. I'm all for, trying to figure out how to put, I know that we had some drawings, and Megan, maybe you still have them, of the Public Works building that was going to be built. Krabby shaking his head too. Good.
Yeah, we do
Um,
have those.
because if I remember correctly, that wasn't, obviously the cost would probably be a little bit more today than it was when you first received it, but I think there's some drawings already that have been done in the past by a local manufacturer, or builder that would be able to do it at a pretty reasonable price. Maybe we start there and kind of work our way that way. If it's all right with you guys, I kind of throwing it out there so we don't start this whole process all over again.
Yes, I would like Public Works. And one of the things that had made me a little nervous about having somebody else run the marina was we got some good people in the marina, and I don't want to leave them high
Well-
and dry, so to speak.
Yeah, I think it would be two separate things. I did some background stuff with Founders 3. They run marinas all over the United States for municipalities. It's not their first time throwing their hat into the arena. And they also do some overseas. Brazil, I think they've got one over in the Pacific somewhere. So they're spread out pretty good. But if it's not feasible, it's not feasible. So any public comment on this?
Bill Gay, 423 150th Avenue, Madeira Beach, Florida. I would suggest that you append a copy of the zoning ordinance for the Marina District with the materials you're providing with the agenda. There are very specific requirements as to what can go on marina property and how that is structured. And I think that needs to be part of the discussion that you have. Thank you.
Next is no smoking on the beach and throughout the city. This is a bill, CS 150-105, regulation of smoking by counties and municipalities. That did pass, I believe.
Yes,
So,
well, it's
That's-
awaiting the governor's signature.
yeah. And hopefully that won't be vetoed. So I know when I am out there with the trash pirates, I don't know what it is about smokers, but they think a cigarette butt is not littering. They are all over the place. I picked up probably 2 gallons of cigarette butts in Johns Pass Village about 2 weeks ago. That was just the cigarette butts. They were, I was throwing them in a 5-gallon bucket, but it filled a good part of the bottom of the bucket up. So I wouldn't mind seeing us doing that, banning cigarettes on city property. That may be I may be stepping into a swamp by saying that, but as one who has never smoked, I would have no problem with it.
Mayor, just a quick question. When you mentioned city property, so like city-owned properties outside of the sand, such as parks, for example, or?
Well, it's a slippery slope. I don't know how far we go, but certainly along the beach. But
Along the sand, right?
I mean, when I was in the parking lots, they were all over the parking lots. When I was walking down the sidewalks, they were all over the sidewalks. I do think we need to maybe get some little receptacles that we can put on, frequently. But people are driving along and just flipping them out the window too, because we're all over the streets. I don't know what the answer is. But I don't know how y'all feel about stopping it on the beach itself.
Robin, if, and maybe Tom, there's a question for you. Technically, so I guess I'm having trouble reading this. So public places in Florida, does that mean everywhere? So you can't smoke outside anywhere in the state of Florida? Is that what that means? Or is that only state regulated areas or parks or beaches or what does that actually mean?
Well, all regulation regarding smoking has been preempted to the state.
Okay,
So we won't be able to do anything unless there's an exception provided by a particular law. In this particular case, it looks like the legislature is allowing a small window of opportunity, and that would be with regard to public beaches and public parks. So if that's something you're interested in doing, we would need to focus on those two things or those two places,
Okay.
beaches and parks. But otherwise, all other smoking regulations are preempted to the state and they would not be effective. They'd in fact be void.
yeah, I mean, I don't smoke, but I have a feeling this is going to be a doozy if we actually do this. Like I said, what kind of penalties could you put on something like this? Or, I mean, who's going to enforce it? I mean, there's a lot of things to talk. I mean, this is just a quick kind of brainstorming session. There's how we obviously got a litter ban, right? And I don't know, is it easier to find? So I guess, well, it's easier to find somebody smoking on the beach than it would be to find somebody littering, I guess. Okay. It's
Well, we've
interesting.
had that for a year and a half and we've yet to give
Right.
out a citation.
So, yeah, so I mean, this could be an interesting one to put out there. I have a feeling you'll get people thinking okay, you're allowed to drink on the beach, but you can't smoke on the beach. So your civil liberties are being violated. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah,
It's just kind of a crazy thing, but I'm wow.
I know it seems bad to just pile on smokers. But the littering is the problem more
Well,
so than the smoking. So I guess I'm willing to try this.
it's something that I know the Big C supports not smoking on the beach. The littering, you're right. The littering is what I have the problem with. I could care less if they smoke as long as they don't throw their cigarette butts out, whether it's on the street or sidewalk or on the beach. But how do you get enforcement on this?
Well, that's an excellent question. In a prior life, in a prior city, there were only two places you could smoke: in your place of your residence or in your vehicle. Smoking was prohibited on any public right-of-way, so that included roads, streets, sidewalks, anything that was parks. So you pretty much, and then smoking was not allowed inside any business as well. And there was only exceptions for two businesses that had a hookah license, and they were grandfathered for smoking, and an adult entertainment establishment, but we did not, it was impossible to enforce. You would still see, it was a litter issue. That's the reason that city made that decision to control litter. But it's still difficult. It would be the same that a police officer would have to observe somebody litter. So whether that's a soda bottle, a water bottle, a napkin, or a cigarette butt, if they observe somebody throwing it onto the street, then they could stop them and issue them a littering citation, which would be the same here. And I know that our deputies have issued a couple of citations for that, for somebody essentially littering, but they're very, very few and far in between. So realistically, this is, again, more of a informing, educating, advocating, putting up signage that there is no smoking. Help us, again, similar to Leave No Trace, help us keep our city as clean and pristine as possible. And please place your litter in the appropriate receptacles, as well as, Mayor, as you stated, to put more of the little smoking containers. And some of them have gotten pretty creative where you could turn it into a survey and people choose, A or B or yes or no to a question on it. So there's some creative, some of the businesses already have those containers or devices where you place your cigarette. So it would be a little bit more, maybe we could get a grant to purchase and maybe distribute to certain businesses throughout.
Yeah, I didn't see any in the village other than couple of ashtrays on the table at the cigar store. That's all I saw. I mean, so maybe what we need to do is just work a little harder on education on the fact that a cigarette butt is litter. I will never forget a year or so ago seeing the photograph of the bird feeding a cigarette butt to one of its young in a nest. So, and when they throw them out on the streets, they go down the gutter into the storm sewer and straight into the water. So,
And also, you mentioned the trash pirates, also kudos to the second organization, the Trash Turtles. They held a cleanup last Saturday at Archibald Park, and their bucket has a little plastic device that sits on the side. And that's where you, as you pick up cigarette butts, they go into that little container. And the container has little holes in the bottom, hole enough for the sand to fall through. So if you pick up a cigarette butt in the sand and you pick up a clump of sand, that sand will go through that device while the cigarette butt does not. So I filled up that little container just as you mentioned. So I picked up like 243 cigarette butts. No, that's not real. I wasn't really counting them.
he was in a contest with me. Maybe we need a big clear container down at John's Pass Village to fill with cigarette butts. And we dump the cigarette butts in there when we pick them up. It might make people realize what they're doing.
Good
I
evening.
don't, hi there.
It's very tall. So I do have cigarette butt dispensers down in John's Pass. We
Yeah, I was
actually
gonna
just
say there
emptied them today.
Yeah.
They're all along the boardwalk,
Are
and
they?
then right as you walk up onto the boardwalk, there's a couple there, and then throughout the village.
I didn't.
I also, they're kind of small.
They're
Yeah,
close to the
not
well, I
trash
very
didn't see them.
containers.
I didn't go
They
up
are
on
on
the
the trash
boardwalk.
containers, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Might-
then I also have them at Archibald,
Archibald.
John's Pass Park, and then I think in the smaller areas as well, because of the issue with cigarette butt dispensers. But
Yeah.
my guys definitely filled up over a 5-gallon bucket today with
Yeah.
butts. So we do have them. I mean, people are
Some-
using them.
yeah.
Yeah, and most, as Megan said, I think mostly along the boardwalk rather
There are a
than,
lot on the boardwalk,
rather
yes.
than down Village Way.
There's a few.
couple.
And some of
Yeah.
them, again, vandalism, they get stolen,
I'm
silly
sure.
things, but people like to take them. So I can check out tomorrow and see, and I have more, so we can put in more.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Probably what we could do is get the convenience stores to quit selling cigarettes. They're one about 20% of them. Okay, I guess we beat that to death. Is there any public comment on this?
Chuck Dillon, 529 Lillian. I mean, I think what we really should be concerned about is, in terms of like bikes, glass, and other things that are not permitted, dogs that are not permitted on the beach, but are there all the time. So if you're gonna try to tell people not to smoke on the beach, that ain't gonna happen, and to try to enforce it, the dogs and the bikes, it's too hard to enforce. But maybe the idea of putting up something, no littering, so, which would seem to be more realistic. I mean, I'm like you guys, I'm not a smoker and it, irks me, but yet smokers think that's a big ashtray, and it's gross. So, but yeah, you had to talk about it. Thanks.
Any public comment? Any more public comment? Next is replacing the beach rake. And I understand the one we've got is shot.
Yes, Mayor and Commissioners, the beach rake that we had been using, I believe it's 7 years old, approximately 7 years. In 2015, had some significant damage, and the repairs are, I guess, tentative, approximately about $12,000 to repair. We had in the capital budget for next fiscal year, 2023, a $70,000 line item to replace the beach rake. We would like to replace this one. So move that purchase up from next year to the current year. We've obtained a quote for the new rake, which is at a little over 58,000 or 58,125. That would, I think, Megan, we would trade in the current rake to that is why that 58,000 instead of
Correct.
65,000.
So on the quote that is on there, they would give us that $7,000 credit. They just want the frame of our old rake. Currently, right now, everything else is just worn out.
Megan, are there any upgrades on that where you can go to stainless on any of that stuff? I know.
It's galvanized, it's dipped galvanized.
Yeah, but-
So it's not, the frame's not the issue on that. The issue on that is the belt itself is dry rotted from being out in the elements. And then every other working component in that beach rake, there's a picture of it right there, it's a heavily used piece of
Yeah.
equipment that sits
Yeah,
outside.
I know it's brutal.
So the
on it.
pulleys all need to be replaced, and that's without us even opening it up.
Okay, so. Okay. I'm wondering if we need to look at the PM program we're doing on it also, on the new one.
It is definitely maintained as it should be. Unfortunately, like working on the beach and the salt water and the
Yeah, and-
sand, that one went through a few really rough red tides. So going into the water a little bit more than typically what we would do. So yes, we will cover it, the new one, and we will also make sure that Leroy looks at it more often.
Is there a
Well,
better way of handling the rack instead of taking it and dumping it in the water? Have we
That
picked it up?
machine does not dump it into the water. That machine, the belt that's on that machine pulls it into the hopper, which you can't really see on this picture. And then the hopper is basically like a dumpster. And then we dispose of that. The rakes that you're thinking of is beach masonizing. Per their permit, they pull it into a pile, and then it gets picked up and taken back out by the high tide.
Okay,
Mhm.
That's,
I'm all for this.
Yeah, it's,
and as I had mentioned earlier, this, and again, we budgeted for it or for next year. We would make a budget amendment, but certainly funding could come from the ARPA funds. I know the discussion, part of it was look for, revenue generating as a possibility, but that's also a possibility that it could be funded. This is a tourism related. The budget for next year was, I believe, out of our parking revenue.
Archibald.
I'm sorry, the Archibald
Mhm.
Fund. We separately account for all the revenues at Archibald Park. So the concession revenue, obviously all the parking space, so all the parking revenue and the revenue from the chair umbrella rentals as well. So that's where it was slated to come out next year. It could be this year's as well.
well, we just increased that Archibald fund just from the parking in the past few months.
Correct.
I don't
So-
remember what page that is, but that in itself will take care of the rake.
You refer to the 250 to the 3?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And that revenue stays in that fund. It's not going to the parking garage, correct? Is the resolution that you adopted at the last regular meeting?
So is this something we will need to come back and vote on, Mr. Trask, or can we just do it with a consensus today?
The answer is it needs to come back.
Okay.
Because this is a works session. Okay.
Right, you can't, obviously, there's
Well,
no,
right,
there's
that's-
no
that's what
voting.
I was saying. There was
but you
no
c-
voting, but I didn't know if we could just do it by
Needs to come back.
consensus. Okay, good
And
enough.
just Mayor and Commissioner, it could come back as a regular item or it could be placed on the consent agenda.
I would say consent agenda. Okay,
Thank you, Megan.
thank you, ma'am. Any public comment on this? Mr. Gomez, do you have anything else for us?
Thank you to everybody that went out and voted and made democracy work. We definitely greatly appreciate that, especially somebody who was born in another country and was naturalized here. So I'm extremely excited. And At the next election, I'll be able to vote as a Madera Beach resident, so I did not get to vote at this election. But thank you to everybody who did come out and vote. Greatly appreciated, and we're thankful, obviously, for all of our residents and our visitors who have been enjoying everything that we have in the nice weather. So please continue to enjoy our city and let us know of anything needing attention. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, this meeting is adjourned at 7. Oop, okay.
Two things. Do we need to pick somebody for our representative to the library board?
No,
Well,
because the person doesn't have to be on the board, and Helen was just put on there. She hadn't even been on there a year, so, and she did the bylaws and all, I understand, for the library.
Okay.
So she can just stay on the board, I would think.
okay, excellent. And
Get you out of the woods.
I know, thank you. And then the other thing, does Archibald Park have a bin where people can leave toys and pick up toys and things like that? Is that something that we can do? The idea is just, you go by in the morning, when doing the turtles nesting and things like that, there's toys everywhere. And so we end up just picking them up and throwing them away. If there was some place that, bin that we can throw them, and then hopefully people don't buy them and they have toys, they pick the toys out of that. Or is it just turned into a extra large garbage bin?
I think my thought would be is it very well would turn into a larger garbage, or at least partially. I think it's a great idea. And I know in prior lives where we had pools, that's what was started coincidentally in the 3 cities that I've worked in. That was tried again at public pools, so a little bit different. And the difference is the health issues became an issue in a public pool. At the beach, I don't know, I mean, really, if there's a health issue, but potentially there could be, and I know there probably likely would be families who wouldn't want to utilize something that somebody left on the sand, but I've seen people use items that were left on the sand. So it's a good idea. I'm just concerned that it could be left as just another trash container. However, we could try it for a little bit for a short amount of time and see what happens.
Well, my question on that too, though, would be, could that leave us open to any liability?
Possibly.
Possibly.
so.
A lot of the times we go out and do a first pass of the beach. And if there's any toys out there, items out there, we will then pick them up. And my staff is really good about finding a child on the beach that doesn't really have anything and then giving those toys to that child. So a lot of times we may think that items left on the beach are good, but most of the time they're broken. So then they do go into the trash, but we do try to reuse as much as we can.
Okay, I like that better than
Yeah.
bin.
Did you want me to comment on that? Obviously.
Well, the liability issue was what
Yeah.
I was interested in.
So the answer is yes. Anything that we provide to the public creates additional liability. Would it cause an increase in our property or casualty insurance? Probably not. Would it be covered if there was an injury? Would be under the policy? Probably yes. And so it wouldn't be any different than a nail on a handrail, or a nail on a deck board, a tree root, a raised sidewalk, anything like that. So it does increase liability, but it probably would be covered by your insurance if someone was injured. High likelihood.
I like Megan's solution better anyway, so.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is there any public comment on that? Okay, with that, this meeting is adjourned at 7:30 PM.